All right, welcome back. This is part two of the classical Republicans with the red Republicans. And my next question is on liberty. Which is the superior liberty, negative or positive liberty?
We actually talked about this last night.
I mean, it's funny with asking questions like that. Like, nobody is ever gonna ask. Like, but I mean, our idea, right? I mean, I said this earlier. Like, the general will of a people, of a body politic, without the ability of these people to act upon this will and to legislate, the things that they want. Without that ability, I don't know how a person can be free. I don't know how there can be real freedom. I don't know how we can wake up every morning and think, we have no control over the laws that we have to follow, right? We have zero control over these things and we just get to elect people every couple of years to make these decisions for us.
Yeah.
But ultimately these people, they're bought and sold like commodities. These politicians are something, a hot commodity for capitalists. And everyone knows this. This is something that every American knows. There's not a whole lot of people that have a lot of faith in Republicans. There's not like the Spartan of a citizen today, it just has, this civic duty to represent, the masses of people. This is not something that exists. Capitalism is pretty much does not allow this type of thing. It's not something that flourishes well, So I think all of us here believe in like a positive liberty. I mean, the idea that, the working people can use the state, they can use a government of their own making, to control the world around them. And specifically, when I say to control the world around them, I basically mean that, that they can make laws that allow for a new way of life. They can redefine the way in which property is held and is viewed. They can do things that right now is completely impossible under the current state of things. The current state is not something that is a friend to the ideas that we have or the interests of working people. That's why we believe in the creation of a new state, right, of a new government. So, but I mean, yeah, this is entirely positive liberty. I mean, this is just textbook. I'm literally talking about Rousseau. It's just pretty old school, I feel. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
the
one thing. Oh,
go ahead.
Just one quick thing is like, when I think about liberty, it's like, I mean, in the United States, certain people will tell you that we have liberty, right? Because of our Constitution, it grants us certain like negative freedoms, right? And that from that we have freedom from this, freedom from that. But I think the funny thing is that a liberal academic will tell you that we have negative freedoms and that's where our liberty comes from. But if you go and talk to normal working class people and you ask them, like, do you have liberty? Do you think we have liberty in this country? Do you think you have freedom? You're going to get a resounding no, right? And I think that goes to say something about, our politics more generally and about, our system more generally, is that people don't feel free and people don't feel like they have liberty. And I think that says something about liberty itself, which is that it is something that you have to sort of like learn from, your active engagement with the masses. I think you have to learn what liberty is through your engagement with the masses and through revolutionary politics. And I think from there you can actually discover what true liberty really is.
Yeah, I mean, we have a liberty today. The liberty we have is freedom from responsibility, freedom from community, freedom from the fraternity of peoples. There's no. It's disgusting, quite like the hyper individualism of liberalism and the way that it corrodes the community life and like a civic nature of a person. I mean, that's. Yeah. I mean, that's something that is. I mean, to say that that's liberty, to say that there's liberty within the alienation, that people feel. I mean, that's disturbing. I mean, something that has to be pointed out, and I think the Red Republicans point this out, is we don't have a country. We don't have a community. Most of us don't have a family. We have nothing, right? And that pisses us off. And most working class people understand that pisses them off. And it's not something that we once had and we lost. The working masses never had a country. Here in the United States, we never had a government that represented the interests of the people, right? It was made from its very foundations. I mean, we can read the Federalist Papers. You can read Madison on this topic. I mean, who's it supposed to represent? Well, the merchants, the landowners.
Yeah,
it's
the people who own the country ought to govern it.
Yeah, exactly. It's according the Notes on Virginia by Jefferson. I mean, he describes the wage laborers, the people that are the vast majority today, as sores upon the republic. You know, these were parasites to him. People like me, I don't know, maybe people like you, John, these were parasites to the republic, according to Jefferson. I mean, that is the country. That's the heritage that we have in this country, and that should piss us off. You know, we want something. We want a country. We want a country develop. You know, made up and composed of the working people. We want a government composed of that something, and I want something to be proud of, and that's something that we don't have.
Do you see that there's a connection between liberty and equality? What are your views on equality?
I mean, how do you want to define that equality? I mean, if you're saying, I mean, specifically.
Well, you can address political equality and economic equality separately if you want.
Well, I think the first thing is that, you know, a Marxist is not coming in here trying to make everybody have the same amount of money. We're not trying to share poverty, right? That's not something we're interested in. So if the idea of equality and being equal is this idea that everybody gets the exact same thing, where we would deny that we're not for that. Marx in the Critique of the Gotha program writes about this exact same thing, is, you know, an equal and free society. And Marx says, well, equal how? I mean, so you're telling me that a worker that has 6 kids should have the same wages as a worker that has no family at all? Like, do you mean equal in that way? Because that's not a very good equal. So I think in that way, it's just obscure and vague, but the idea of equality in a political sense, you know, in a civic sense, now that's very different. That's something we take very seriously, the equality of a people recognized by their government, right? The equal participation of a people, you know, is that they can grab that. You know, it's their civic duty to grab that, and they can grab that. You know, that's very important to us. I think that type of equality, the equality of citizens in the eyes of their government and themselves as, you know, equal peoples. I mean, that's incredibly important. But I mean, these vague ideas of equality deriving from everybody getting the same thing, that's, to be honest, John, that's just weird. That's very vague. It doesn't really go anywhere. And that's something we try to avoid. When we talk about equality, we talk about the, you know, equality of almost being able to hear the masses' voice, you know, me being able to actually go and be heard, right? Because the equality in this country doesn't exactly work like that, right? And maybe the state clearly doesn't view everybody as equal. And the fact that I have to say the state in third person is problematic in itself, you know? So, I mean, and that's something that I think we're trying to point out here, is that, you know, there's different type of equality that we're talking about. And it's an equality that we certainly don't have. But I think most people know this. I mean, nobody thinks that they have the same amount of political power as Jeff Bezos, right? Nobody thinks that. You know, but in the state that we would have, that we you know, that we see people that, you know, that do have the same amount of political power as each other, you know. And so that's the equality I think that we struggle for.
Okay. How wedded are you to capitalism?
Really?
If at all. I mean, as far as well, I mean, you mentioned earlier about how you people can you know, should have a say in their government and everything, but what if the majority was still you know, reluctant to cast away all forms of capitalism?
So first and foremost, if our program was put into action, let's think about this, John. Like, let's walk through this. If our program was put into action, and the masses of people in this country struggled to pursue that program, right? And finally we merged, our little group merged with a bunch of other groups. We form an independent workers party. We come up with another program that has similar things. It's pursued. And the next thing you know, you have the masses of people that have transferred all political power into like a national workers assembly or something like that. And then the next day they just take it all away. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's a little bizarre to me that that's even on the table of a question. But I think what is serious is the fact that in this country, I mean, we're not advocating for instance, the expropriation of small farmers or small businesses, right? I mean, the idea that can exist is fine. I mean, do you think it's really like, do you think politically it makes a lot of sense just to take to take 6 acres from a small farmer? I mean, what use of that is like the economy? No, I mean, our first aim, right, is to make inroads politically and economically against the the ruling class, specifically the major economic power that they have, the productive capabilities they have, the capital that they have. I mean, which is one and the same in this instance, right? The whole point is to try to wrestle that away from them, right, and to put that in the hands of the people, right? And that's the first and foremost. Like, so the idea of like there's going to be like a market sector, there's going to be like these small farms and these small businesses. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But we're going to make sure that the major the major economic powerhouses in this country are not running for profit, right? They're owned and operated, by the people and for the people. We're making sure that we have an economy that works for working people.
Yeah.
And we're not going to use that DSA thing where they say an economy that also works for working people. No, it's either it works for the capitalist class or it doesn't work for or it works for the people. It's not going to work for both of them. You know what it can work for? It can work for it can work for the capitalists and maybe some middle class people. Almost never does, and then screw everybody else. Or it's going to work for the working class, and the working class is going to be able to give cheap credit, extend cheap credit to small farmers. Right? Is able to take care of small businesses and let them keep producing the commodities that they can produce for a while. And I'm not saying this is socialism. I'm just describing the type of state that I think we would have immediately after. I mean, yeah, that's going to exist. And I think that's going to work for a lot more people. I think it's a lot more attractive, the idea of like cheap credit from in the hands of like a state democratically made up of working people than it is like some capitalists that don't really want to compete with you. Like, I mean, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of these questions are just baseline questions I ask for all everybody I'm going to be talking to. So what are symbols of your ideology?
Well, the logo we got, we have the red ribbon of labor, a red bow of labor, and that was something that was used during the Russian Revolution. Soldiers would stick the pin on their uniforms to represent their commitment to the people, to the working class, and yeah, I mean that's our most like upfront and in your face logo that we have.
Yeah, I mean the red. Yeah, it's a red ribbon. I mean, and that's pretty universal actually. That's all throughout Europe. Labor parties usually take the red ribbon, and then we have the two hands shaking, which is actually a social democratic symbol, which that kind of shows our history within the DSA, right? And it's supposed to show fraternity. On one hand, there was a white hand and a black hand, and it was supposed to show solidarity. Ours is sometimes a red hand, sometimes a black hand. It's always different depending. But and it can mean many things. It can be the alliance between working people and small farmers. It can be the solidarity among people of all ethnicities, races, genders, anything like that. United together at the thing that intersects all their lives. And what is that? That's class.
You guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm not. No. Oh, I'm good.
So you talk a lot about, and I see on your website you have a lot about labor parties, but that's kind of, we don't really use that term in the United States much. But is it a good description to say that that you'd be more aligned with like, or you'd be more favorable of a like a European Labour Party? What do you think of the UK's Labour Party? Maybe under Jeremy Corbyn, compare Jeremy Corbyn to the current Keir Starmer now. What is your take on that?
Well, I mean, they're social democratic. I mean, you got to remember, workers' organizations can come in any variety of forms. I mean, I still think that the Labour Party has a history of being a working class organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But working class organizations can degenerate. Not only can they degenerate, they can also be stolen. They can be taken away from the hands of the masses of workers that put so much hard work into that country. I mean, we want a revolutionary workers' party. That is what we want in this country, right? And when we say that, we want one that encompasses that takes in all these tiny little micro vanguard organizations, right? That alone they don't do anything. I mean, we want to bring together, regroup, the sections of the left that are willing, and the type of labor party that we want is revolutionary in its character. You know, I don't think any of us think that the Labour Party in England is revolutionary in its character. I think it's social democratic at most. Now, at this point, by the way, in this point in history,
Especially under Keir Starmer, if you see that. Let's see. Do you believe that your ideology is ascendant or in decline?
Our ideology. I mean,
I know
it depends, right? Because like, I mean, just 100 years ago, you saw a much more radical sort of like labor history, in the United States. However, that turned into something that ultimately, like, the Communist Party of the United States ended up supporting the Democratic Party, during the Popular Front, and it hasn't really been able to pry itself away from that, sort of like mode of operating. So, I mean, in a sense, like we are a resurgent, our ideology is resurgent in the sense that like we do represent some like early radical working class history in the United States. We still uphold like revolutionary politics. We do believe in a worker state. We do believe in a revolution. We do believe in class independence. We don't believe with working with the Democratic Party. So we do represent it in a certain way, but in other ways we're completely divergent from it. And we're trying to sort of like provide leadership from what we view does have a lot of potential, which is like these organizations that like, the Communist Party of the United States, like you said, all these little like micro, vanguard parties. We want to provide leadership to them and say that like we can represent something that would actually like, see success in the United States. But in order to do that, we kind of have to be divergent from, sort of what is like mainstream radical left politics, in the United States. So it's complicated, but
yeah, and there's some groups that we like the reason we take the DSA so seriously is because of its membership, right? I mean, that's where everybody goes. We came from the DSA, right? We have totally different views now, but we all came from the DSA. Why? If you're a young person, capitalism just doesn't seem to be working out. I came to socialism in a very different way than most, but yeah, I don't come from a conservative area, or I don't come from a liberal area, or from a very academic area exactly. So, I think it's not working out for a lot of people. A lot of people feel alienated. The DSA is that's the first place people go if they're interested in socialism. They're not as advanced as, say, there's a group that that I think we're friends with and we agree with a lot of their positions. Named the Bolshevik tendency, and they're very advanced politically. They got things down. The DSA is not like that. In fact, there's some very backwards elements. Not only social democratic, but I mean just liberal Democrats. I mean, that's what you got in there. But there are a lot of good people that we think that we can catch. We can kind of meet with them right before they get caught into the the liberal politics of DSA leadership. People like us can maybe stop them. And say, hey, what about this? If you're interested in socialism, maybe let's talk. But ultimately, this has been asked to us. I mean, what if we get kicked out of the DSA? What if we leave the DSA? What if the DSA doesn't work out? We're fine with that. The work that we've done now, I mean, is more than any DSA chapter has ever done here in Idaho ever before, especially before we were involved in it, in leadership, I should say. So we would just continue doing what we're doing. And I think, well, goddamn, I think we do a pretty damn good job. So
I don't know if you want to go into tactics, but as you try to expand outside of Idaho, do you see yourself, starting up other units of Red Republicans, or do you see like joining with other chapters of the Communist Party of the United States, or other socialist groups, and just joining them in solidarity, or do you see them as potential recruits to your group?
Well, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning our slogan, right? Because our slogan is unity, independence, and socialism. And so the first step to getting to socialism, right, is we need to have unity and we need to have independence. And the independence can be seen in our political program we advocate for. But in terms of tactics and strategy, unity is going to come through political regroupment, right? We do believe that we have forces in the United States. We have people in the United States who are ready to dedicate themselves to this, right? That are ready to dedicate themselves to a real, authentic working class politics, a real revolutionary politics. And so political regroupment with different groups, like you mentioned, we are willing to unite with anybody and to form coalitions with anybody that has revolutionary politics on their mind. That is what guides them, and that are willing to discuss programming, unite behind a program. So in that sense, yeah, tactics and strategy includes going across the United States, forming more Republican chapters that are independent, that are self-sufficient, can do the kind of things we're doing here in Idaho within unions and whatnot, but also reaching out to whatever groups might exist within their state, and talking about regroupment, and trying to talk about, marching towards a future where we have an independent workers' party.
Yeah, I mean, specifically, we're not going to be advocating to steal membership away from other groups. That's just not how we like to do things. Even in other caucuses, we don't recruit in the DSA. For instance, there's a caucus called Class Unity. We won't recruit from them. We basically put a block on that. We'll work with them to recruit them because we want to have trust. We're not about here trying to build up ourselves at the expense of others. We're trying to figure out how we can work together. The Communist Party to us, I mean, basically ever since the Popular Front, and then Gus Hall's All People's Front, has taken a very different route than what we're interested in. They viewed the Democrats as allies. The last president called Obama an ally of the working people, which is just entirely untrue. And so, I mean, to us, the Communist Party is not something that we're looking to join into, no. And we're not going to merge into that. However, we would like, if we can get our programs straight, if people can accept some of our positions, and we can work with their positions too, then we want to see merges. Yeah, we want to see greater unity, but we're not going to have unprincipled unity.
Right.
We're not going to have unity for the sake of unity. We're going to have unity because we actually agree to some major political positions and political strategy, and most importantly, we want the independence of our movement from the capitalist class. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's all I have as far as questions for you. Do you have anything else you want to add? Any shout outs or anything you're going to be, any events you're going to be having in the future?
Yeah, in February here in Boise, we're going to be doing there's going to be a talk about Mamiya Abu Jamal, who's a political prisoner, who is a political prisoner here in the United States. He was a Black Panther Party member that COINTELPRO pretty much tried to take down over and over again. And then I don't know if you're familiar with the COINTELPRO operations, John, but you should look it up and you'll be surely disappointed in our country. Well, I shouldn't even say it's our country, it's because it's not. You'd be surely disappointed in the government. So basically we're gonna have a kind of an educational about that here in Boise. We're gonna fly up a friend of ours who was in the Black Panther Party, Gerald Smith, there in Oakland, California. Is gonna fly up here to Boise and give a talk about it and learn about the man who was absolutely framed for something he clearly did not do. It's very clear, a lot of the stuff's declassified anyway, you can see it, and it's a big oops, we messed up thing for the U.S. government that the U.S. government just doesn't kind of want to admit. Sometimes the government can murder people, like with Fred Hampton, and make a movie about it. It's okay, but this one's a little tougher because the guy's still alive and he's in prison.
Yeah.
For something that he sure as hell didn't do.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I got for today. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And best of luck to you. And long live the Republic.
All right.